Um, So welcome everybody. We're very happy to bring our fourth and final webinar for the year. And we're super excited to have Marguerite Sacco presenting to us today. And I'll do a quick introduction of Marguerite and then hand over to you, Marguerite. So Marguerite is a PTSTA in organizational and has a degree in industrial psychology. She has specialist certificates in training and management, HR management, and appreciative inquiry and coach skills. She's also an accredited assessor and moderator. Marguerite teaches transactional analysis and designs and implements programs using TA in organizational development. And closer to home, Marguerite is a valued member of the SATAA executive as our vice chair, and is also the Middle East and Africa representative on the ITAA Board of Trustees. So Marguerite, we're very excited to have you here today, and hand over to you.
Thank you, Andrew. Some of that was a bit of a mouthful. All the TA qualifications and things.
Yeah.
Okay. I think what we want to start with is just a little bit of contracting around how we are going to work this morning. The first thing is to be aware that maybe we will have one or possibly two people coming in late. So just to know that that might happen, and we will manage that if and when it does happen. Otherwise, it's just the three of us, which is also okay. My perspective is going to be from an organizational. Your perspectives, Kirsty and Andrew, are coaching, right? So what I was looking for with this workshop is to look at the different ways in which the 3 Ps can be used in the different disciplines. So we will have a conversation possibly around that. The way I want to structure this is like this. If I can find and share my slides. Okay. And hide the floating controls. What I've done is that I have used quite a large article by Keith Tudor from the Transaction Analysis Journal, where he has done us all a huge favor and summarized a lot of the theories around permission, potency, and protection. So I used that as the basis for what I'm going to present. And what I'm going to look at is, and my focus is, first the classical view and definition of the 3 Ps. How were they originally described? How were they originally understood? I'm actually adding to that, beyond the classical view, the more modern views of it. Not a lot of that, but some, okay? And we can discuss that a bit. I want to give you, from my perspective, my orientation, which is organizational, share with you how the 3 Ps apply in my field, and show you by the permission wheel exercise something that I do in organizational settings when this 3 Ps opportunity arises. So I will share the organizational approach that I use and the 3 Ps underlying it. And then we can have discussions, because I would like to hear from you, your experiences around the whole issue of the 3 Ps. Okay. We are a small group, so we probably won't take the full 2 hours. We will end when we end within that period of time. Is there anything from your side, guys, that we need to think about in terms of a contract, how we work together?
Not from my side. I think you've covered it all.
Okay.
Sounds good.
You all good? All right, great. So let's just start. I want to get an idea of your, where did the 3 Ps come into your awareness? What is your understanding of them? Possibly, have you read that huge Keith Tudor article? Because I don't want to be preaching to the converted, so to speak. So it helps me to just establish how much do you know, and take it from there.
So if I start us off, I probably first really got introduced to it when I was doing foundational year in transactional analysis. And I must say, it's not been one of the ones that have, one of the models or papers that has been stuck in my mind in the forefront. So every now and then I hear it sort of being passed around in rooms, and I go, and it's one of those things I'm like, oh, I want to read that.
Yeah.
But what I do hold very dearly about ethical work is that as long as the practitioner and the client is on the same page of what is being offered and received, and as long as it's not illegal, ethical work will be done. So whenever I've paid some attention to the 3 Ps, it always feels like that holds really good hands with that sentiment.
Yeah. So the protection there in terms of the ethical issue,
and the permission, and then the last one about the potency. So when in my work with people, I borrow from Coactive Coaching's one of their pillars, which is people are creative, resourceful, and whole. And my experience is that when those 3 buckets are well filled or are able to be filled well, people's ability to reach potency is much greater. So so it's that sort of like ethical work and believing in people swirling together.
And through that their potency arises. Lovely. Okay, I've got a thought on that, but hold on to that. Kirsty, let's just hear from you.
So quite similarly, it's not something I've explored in great depth. I haven't read the article, but I think I probably first came across it maybe even in my coach training. It was mentioned. So I trained with Karen, and so she shared a lot of TA in the coach training.
And
so I feel like it's something that's always been around on the periphery, but I've never really examined in detail. But even just looking at the words now and thinking about the work that I do, I mean, it very much feels like underlying principles of everything. And even outside of work, if I think about relationships, I can see how these 3 qualities are actually so important for an intimate relationship of any kind. Or an authentic relationship of any kind. And so I'm just thinking like it really does actually weave its way through in a personal way and a professional way. Like I'm quite excited to have this conversation. To actually name it as
nice. I just thought, Kirsty, when you talk about the authenticity and the intimacy, in fact, that the definition or a piece that Eric Byrne wrote about intimacy, and in it he talks about how there is that protection. So in intimacy, the adults, the adult in me and the adult in you form an adult unspoken psychological contract that says, I will protect you and I will protect me. I will not allow you to step over my boundaries, and vice versa. So the adult is holding that intimacy space while the child ego states in the 2 people get to play. So that's just lovely that you brought that in. And Andrew, your perspective is also interesting in terms of what I'm going to bring now, because there's, I think, 2 ways of looking at this 3 Ps thing. And the one is that classically, what is and has been written about is that the power, the permission, the protection comes from the therapist. Okay, so classically that was all about therapists and patients at the time. And that there is a technique even and a way of identifying when is the right moment to give permission to the client to change their script and together with the potency and protection that is required when someone changes their script. But what you presented a bit there in what you said was, in fact, it's the permission, it's the client who needs to be potent, not you as the practitioner. Yeah. So
yeah, well, I suppose maybe this links into that the adults of both people having that contract of safety, that and how I hold my work that I do as a coach and a coach supervisor is that we're there as equals. So
yeah,
and I think that's probably one of the key distinctions between therapist and coach and coach supervisor is that it's not my mandate to give somebody the permission where they can't do it for themselves. You know, if I notice that in my clients, there's a good chance that I'm starting to wonder, is this a referral case?
Okay, nice. That's also really useful and important in terms of the 3 Ps, is to say when is it a referral. Let's have a look though at some of the theory and continue that discussion. Okay, just give me a moment. I need to close this door. It's making sense. Okay, it's better. Okay, so let's have a look at what we've got here. Okay, I might have to move you guys, so if you see yourselves or the black mark walking around the screen, it's me trying to get you out of the way of the slides. Okay. Okay, so first let's look at permission, right? So Pat Crosman in her article on the 3 Ps. And I must just mention that Pat Crosman actually won an award for her article and then gave it back or something. I can't quite remember the details, but basically she said that when she wrote her article, it was unresearched, not reviewed, and so she didn't think it was safe. So interesting from the protection point of view, she didn't think that what she had written should have been put out there without it being further researched. So that's quite an interesting thing to keep in mind. But when I read what she wrote, I still think that it was very valid, and I think that the research has held it up. But anyway, let's have a look. So what she was writing about was that permission has to do with scripts. And the permission we are talking about is the permission from the therapist to the patient to cancel their injunctions. So in this clinical space, it's around the injunctions and canceling of the injunctions. It's to enable the client or the patient to make autonomous choices free of injunctions. So that is what autonomy was also always about, was to be free of the injunction. A person's script has a life or death penalty. So that is the extent of the severity of the issue. It's not real life or death. Okay, now in the clinical space, it may actually be, because you might be working with someone who's suicidal, of course, you know, or homicidal, in which case then it is. But what we're talking here particularly about is that it is a life or death, a psychically life or death issue. That if I disobey my parental injunctions that I have introjected, that form a part of me, what's going to happen to me psychically, psychologically, perhaps I should use that word. That is where the work needs to take place. So permission is a particular transaction that occurs between therapist and patient at a particular point in therapy, whereby the therapist effects a change in the direction of the patient's behavior or attitude, which before that time would have seemed either impossible or untenable. So that's also for me important in terms of choosing the moment and choosing it wisely to use a transaction that will actually land. And that then goes into the issue of the safety around it. And what for me is important here is it's about the fact that I might see and hear somebody saying, oh, I can't do that. And then I might be You know, why can't you? What would stop you? What would happen if you did do that? And it may be that none of those questions land because the person is nowhere near ready to cancel the injunction. And that is where it's intriguing for me, because you know, you can do as much of that in the right ways as is possible, you know, not giving advice, but exploring that. Why can't you do it? What is it that holds you back? And if you find that there's some sort of unwillingness to go there, or the person goes there, but then the next time you see them, they haven't enacted what they said they would, or they've changed, there's something nervous and frightened in the way they are now talking about it, you can recognize maybe that the cancelling of the injunction, they're not ready to do that yet. And it's in the injunction that the stuckness lies. I put here also, it reminded me, what she wrote here reminded me of what Gabor Mate talked about. Just something on one of the videos where he said if a child has to choose between attachment and authenticity, they will choose attachment, which makes sense for the child. So once I've done that in childhood, and then I come to counseling or to coaching, or even in my organizational space, which I'll talk about a bit later, if somebody suggests a change, if that is tapping into my decision to change who I was in order to feel attached and to believe that I am safe in the world, I'm not going to change anything. So the moment of permission is so important.
I have to smile at the synchronicity because I literally read that quote yesterday on my Instagram about choosing between attachment and authenticity.
Attachment, authenticity. Wow. Timing. So amazing. Yeah. I think it's so powerful. I think it really hits home the extent of the dilemma, the extent of the decision, and the extent of what happens if I let go. Yeah.
I think it brings great comfort because to a child, it feels like that life or death. You know, if I don't attach to my caregiver, I will die because I need their care and their love and all of that. It's a literal survival mode. But as an adult, you feel that way. Once you start looking at it, can feel a bit like, what's wrong with me? Like, why can't I just implement this more?
Yeah, exactly.
But that permission is like actually, it's totally normal to feel that way.
Yeah.
And you can begin to shift it.
Yeah, I think that's so nice as well, Kirsty, because you do exactly when we unpack these beliefs formed in childhood, now in the here and now, we can at that intellectual level look at it and go, what's wrong with me? This is so easy. Why can't I do this? Of course I can do this. But we need to be aware in terms of the permissions and the potency and the protection that there's a parent ego state in that person who's watching this and going, oh yeah, really? You can do this? We'll see about that. And that is perhaps where they're still not doing it, even though we can. That's where the dilemma takes hold. Andrew, do you have any thoughts or comments so far?
So earlier when Kirsty spoke about intimacy, and you guys had a couple of to and fro's about it, I was thinking about time structuring, and at the fork in the road, after you've gone through the first 4 or so steps, where you can either go to games or to intimacy, and was thinking about, does that fork in the road indicate like potentially this is the time to give the permission? Like also thinking with time structuring, that as you go further down the path, the stakes, the risk and stakes get higher. So there's I'm just imagining in particular in a therapy relationship, that could be maybe at least one of the lenses that help give insight about what's happening in
what's going on
underneath.
Yeah, that's very interesting as well. And I'm just thinking that if you're working with a client and you get to the fork and you may be thinking that they are moving towards autonomous choices and intimacy and making those types of decisions and choices in their life, but then they don't, that in fact they might enter into playing games harder, not only in their lives, but with you as the practitioner, where they might say, and I'm just sort of making this up as I go along, they might say to you, yes, yes, I can do that, definitely, and then not do it and come back and something else is going on suddenly, or not return. That's another thing that, and you may as coaches even have had that. And you wonder what happened there. You know, it seemed like it was going so well and they've never come back. Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? And perhaps it is about the fork in the road. And whoa, no, it's still not safe enough for me to engage at that intimate level. And so the gaminess unfolds.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what strikes me is how when we talk about a permission to an injunction, it sounds quite simple, but in real life, it's like the injunctions are complex networks that work together, and they're sort of built on like maybe like a pyramid. And some can potentially be released by a permission, and others actually need a series of rounds to unpick and let go.
Yeah. Have you ever drawn that, Andrew? This pyramid?
No.
That you're thinking?
No. It just fell out of my mouth now.
Definitely draw it.
Maybe draw it. See if you can draw it. It sounds really like an interesting idea, really interesting idea. So see if you can draw it, and one day show us somehow. Yeah.
And to add a layer to that, if it's all right, it's making me think of the model immunity to change. Where when you don't do the thing that you're trying to give yourself permission to do, usually it's because there's a hidden competing commitment. And I find often that the permission is not really about the thing you want to do. It's about whatever that competing thing is that's getting in the way. And so it's exactly what you just said, Andrew. Like, I've got to find the thing that actually needs the permission, and then I can get to the actual permission that I can.
I love that. I love that. That's so, pertinent. Oh. Okay, nice. Okay. Cosmin goes on to talk about 3 points about the therapist. She says they must hook the patient's young professor by supplying more data. So this is in giving permission. What would you do? They must be stronger than the patient's original internalized parent. They are giving permission to the patient's child to disobey the instructions of the parent. Okay. Steiner, what did Steiner say about permission? He defined it as a transaction in which the parent of the therapist directs the patient to perform a certain behavior. That's very directional. And he said a transaction in which the therapist attempts to align the patient with his original script-free natural child ego state. Okay. Stop me if there's anything you want to discuss as I go along. And then Eric Byrne said true permissions are merely permits, like a fishing license. Just as a license does not compel one to fish, a permission does not compel one to challenge the injunction or resolve the impasse. And I just love that. I love the way he writes, and that's the point, is that you can invite, you can put it out there, and the person can pick it up or not. They can fish or not, but that's not your decision. Then Byrne actually gave a set of transactions in terms of giving permission. He said, first hook the adult or wait until it is active and form an alliance with the adult. State your plan and see if the adult agrees with it. So there's that strong drawing the adult into this conversation. Then, if everything is clear, give the child permission to disobey the parent. This may be done clearly and in simple imperatives, no ifs, ands, or buts. Offer the child protection from the consequences and reinforce this by telling the adult that this is all right. So that was his suggestion of the process. What are your thoughts on this?
It's making me think of like the pre-steps to doing a bullseye transaction.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, and the other thing that comes to mind is the okay box over the functional ego states. So getting enough transactions from okay to okay to give enough of a safe foundation to then do these potentially quite challenging things of giving the permission to disobey and then reinforce. That's what comes to mind.
I'm wondering about step 5, offer the child protection from the consequences, what that would look like.
I wish we could watch him in action to see that. What do you think? I mean, from your own points of view, how might that be done?
It's so hard to imagine in a therapeutic sense because we don't work therapeutically with a coach. Because at the beginning,
but as a coach,
like hook the adult, we work with the adult primarily. So it already feels a bit different. And also, I feel like my role is not to give permission. My role is to hold space for the client to give themselves permission, which is quite a difference. But offer the child protection from the consequences. I guess I would ask questions that got the client to offer the client the opportunity to think, well, you know, what happens if I do this and everything falls apart?
Yes.
You know, explore that a little bit, a little bit of worst case scenario type of thing, but with the intention of it's actually not going to be this. In a child soothing, I might put it that way. Or like
I think
if you're gonna feel, if you're gonna do the thing and you're gonna feel what does Brené Brown call it? A vulnerability hangover. You know, if you're gonna get the feel bads afterwards, what can you do to help that?
I think that is where the protection comes in. What will you do if, etc., etc. But Andrew, what were you going to say?
So what came to mind is the developing one's ability to self-stroke.
Yes.
And then through that, maybe adjusting your own economy of strokes and how you get those met. And again, I'm struck by how like a sequence of events can be really useful because it's habits. You know, the other thing that comes to mind is oh man, I just lost the term now. A racket system. So needing to have a couple of rounds of feeling the distress again, and then having a present here and now adult come from within the okay box, giving the nurturing, maybe even some structuring strokes to the scared child in that moment, and it'll take a couple of times, many times potentially to resolve, and also like I often wonder if if we can ultimately ever be completely resolved, like there's a good chance there's going to be a combination of events that might hook one back into the pattern, and that's also okay, because that's what makes us human.
Yeah, yeah. Nice. Okay, let's have a look at further thoughts on this. So Williams and Brown in 1978 then said, well, permissions can be given actually from any ego state. They, when they're delivered from the child, usually they have the greatest impact. I think this part then, Andrea, you mentioned the bullseye transaction. And I think that's where this would come in. The most effective permissions are simultaneously communicated from all three ego states. Permission is actually something which is taken by the client rather than given by the therapist. So, I mean, in a bullseye transaction, the transaction is given from the adult ego state in the practitioner to all three ego states. The difference here is they're suggesting that it's actually communicated from all three ego states of the practitioner, which then goes also to, I think it's very potent, that. What do you think?
Yeah, again, I'm thinking about the okay box over the functional ego states, and how the traditional diagram for a bullseye is from, like you said, from the adult to the parent, adult, and child. But actually, then when you put the functional ego states over it, the okay box over that, you can separate it out into the positive parental ego states, obviously the adult, and then the positive child ego states. That does seem, and also the other thing that I feel like the thing that popped in my mind was one of those ain't it awful sequence of transactions, when it's like critical parent to critical parent going, oh, these days, you know, it's just tough. So there's like there's almost like there's a resonance that happens when it comes from the like ego state to like ego state. So maybe there's something to add about authenticity of receiving a transaction from recognizing where it's actually from. It's not just from the adult, it's from the positive parent ego states, and equally for the child.
I do think that the permission, as they say, delivered from the child usually has the greatest impact. I think that the child ego state is extremely powerful, and when we get it right, but as you say, together with a very, very strong adult, an integrated approach of adult and child would have to be used there to deliver a very potent permission message. But that's where it's quite nice to say it's not only given from the adult entirely, it's an adult together with the other ego states involved and engaged as well.
Susanna Temple's model of functional fluency and the tool that's come out of her work there, the TIFF tool, often in the analysis with the person that's taken the assessment, you'll start to look at the ratio of effort to impact of the transactions coming from each of the ego states, and it was really striking that it seems like it is the vast majority of people that get a surprise that when they see that the ratio is much higher from the child ego state, and with that there's a great amount of permission to find your own flavor and show up in that way.
Sure, that's interesting. Okay, then Holloway contributed as well by saying cure by permission is a limited achievement. Giving permissions may contribute to a sense of omnipotence in the therapist, which I think we've already kind of touched on. And Holloway distinguished between social control contracts, which may result in the patient no longer following an injunction, and autonomy contracts, which is achieving individuation. So there are the differences there in how you can approach this permission. Originally, it really was around this, the no longer following an injunction, but I think further input from various transactional analysts has brought this idea of achieving of individuation, achieving of autonomy in their own rights and not by contract with the practitioner. Yeah. Okay, so that's the few pieces of theory I wanted to bring you on permission. Let's have a look at protection. So protection needs to be, Crossman said, it needs to be all right to disobey mother or father so that the child will not be deserted, die, or be punished for disobedience. A patient, having taken a therapist's permission to disobey his parents' injunction, finds himself in a state of panic and an existential vacuum and needs to receive temporary protection from the therapist. So it's safety to make changes, and they say intrapsychically and interpersonally. So this again is this thing that I said earlier. There's two things really going on here. There's I will protect you interpersonally in this process that we are going through. I will make sure, for instance, I will not shame you. We will keep this confidential, ethical matters. That is my role with you interpersonally. The other aspect is that psychological protection of protecting you from your own parent injunctions, from your own parental backlash when you even begin to think of changing something. And again, there's the question is, how can the therapist or the coach or whoever is the practitioner, shall we say, offer that protection to your client? I will protect you from your own parental backlash. Have you ever experienced anything like that in your work? Where Steiner talks about they're finding themselves in a state of panic, an existential vacuum, where they really, perhaps for a moment or two or a while, need some sense that you will hold the space for me and let me know I'm safe. Because I'm not at a point yet to know that I am safe, to look after myself internally.
I think I may have had moments of that. And obviously this is somewhere, this is very close to the line of therapy versus coaching, in my sense. But, you know, this other sentiment that coaching can be therapeutic without it being therapy. So people are going to have, they can experience change to this level within a coaching space. And what comes to mind is the comparative script system.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know that theory very well, but I really like the image of it where the practitioner and the client are drawn as circles, and there's quadrants, and the two quadrants facing each other are in the here and now, and the quadrants furthest away are each person's past.
Yeah.
And there's almost like this magical bubble that forms around there, and within that there's safety within the moment. So, and I think within that safety in the moment, it gives the safe enough space for people to feel this existential vacuum. And I suppose what I become very aware of is that the coaching session will end at some point, in a, you know, whatever X minutes. And this person does need to be able to walk out of this room, create a resourceful whole enough to, you know, to look after themselves.
Yes.
But I think also the nature of that bubble is that is built on, for me, creative resource and wholeness. So I still believe that the person's able to feel this existential vacuum while also being able to deal with it themselves. Even if momentarily they're borrowing from the bubble, so to speak, that we've created together.
And almost like when you said the words hold space, Marguerite, and it's like, I think that's exactly what it is. It's like, I'm not going to panic. You don't need to panic. I'm trying to think, how would I give protection? You know, and I think for me, it's governing myself so that they might be in this panicky state, but I am not. And they can almost borrow my belief for a moment that it is actually all okay.
That it's okay.
And then also recognizing that when they're experiencing that, it's not just what's going on in their head, it's also a physiological thing. There's something as simple as, okay, just take a pause, take a deep breath. It can really just help them kind of get through that. And I think taking charge to remind them to take a deep breath is a way of offering protection from all those feelings.
Exactly.
And it's so simple.
It's lovely that, because I think I was just thinking of how when we are in that state of a panic, it's useful to have somebody outside of ourselves who will notice things like, I'm hardly breathing, or my breathing is so shallow. So physiologically, for you to be the observer of the person and to assist even in that respect. I was also thinking of how you might have situations where somebody who you're working with starts to call you after hours in a state of panic, checking in, is this okay? I did this. I just want to tell you what I did and whatever. How do you deal with that in terms of this notion of protection? They are possibly seeing you there as my protector, my nurturer, my everything. You have now taken the place of their own internal capacity to self-nurture and self-protect. What do you do with that?
So for me, I would be quite concerned in that moment of how much of this is the client just going through an existential threat right now, and is this an anomaly, or is this the third time that they've called, and now we've got a pattern, and now it'd be quite. So it would be. I think in the moment, it's settle the ball. You know, Brené Brown uses this metaphor of settle the ball, and then when I see them next in the coaching space, it would be, so what happened there? What are you learning? How are you, figuring out with them what's actually happening here? Because if it is becoming a pattern now, and I'm thinking maybe they're trying to create a symbiotic chain with me, I would be very worried about that, and then that would also be cause for a different kind of conversation with that person. You know, is coaching still working? Is there something else that is needed here? Either stepping out of coaching or working alongside with coaching.
I think what you would have is an unconscious contract that you need to bring to the surface and say, I'm noticing that this seems to be going on. What's happening? What is going on? How do you see me? Because you are seeing me as your savior in one way or another. I mean, you wouldn't say that, but so how are you seeing me? And what am I prepared to show up as? And that's recontracting.
There's something that I've really enjoyed in my time in the coaching world is that, and originally the accountability partnering from the coaching side still felt quite old school and maybe a bit parental. And in recent excuse me, in recent years, the ICF in particular, which is top of my mind, have rewritten their competencies around it. And it's much more of approach of how are you partnering the client in developing their own system of accountability, which I think is also, it's a much more authentic ownership of the work to be done.
Yeah. Nice. I see we've got a baby joined us. Sweetheart. Okay. I actually stopped sharing because Kirsty, you disappeared, and then I thought maybe somebody else had joined in and I'm not seeing them. And then I look and it's them.
Woke up from the nights. Daddy's taken a few minutes to himself and then he'll come.
So welcome. All right, so then, yeah, I think we've already discussed this in terms of what we've just discussed, which was Fanita. English was pointing out that in terms of protection, be careful not to be patronizing, infantilizing, and setting up a phony protection racket. And that's what we have just spoken about. I think this was not Fanita English. If the client's need for the therapist has not subsided by 3 months, the therapist is probably playing a rescue game. So again, 3 months, but this would be in therapy. So to be aware of that, and it differs though, I think in your field. An alternative view is that it is more useful and therapeutic to explore the client's fantasies about safety and to help them work through their anxieties about going against their scripting, being disobedient, and being unsafe, which is what we've been talking about, yeah? Let's have a quick look at potency. So Steiner in 68 said, potency is expressed in permission by the emphasis with which permission is given. So it's around the emphasis of that. It's exemplified by the willingness of the therapist temporarily to carry the burden of the patient's panic when in an existential vacuum. So it goes strongly with what we've just been talking about and involves a commitment to curing patients with valid consideration and a willingness to confront the patient at the impasse. So that interests me, the whole idea of confronting the patient. And I think I've got some more on that somewhere. Let's see where it comes up again. The potency of the therapist has to be commensurate with the potency of the injunction laid down by the parents of the patient. Potency means power to confront and is an adult-to-adult transaction. Whereas some therapists may take too much power and even abuse it, others may too readily give it away, which is also an interesting thought. Yeah, so I think that was also this confronting, and where it says here, willing to confront. And I see that taking place within a contract that says, there are times when I may confront you with what I'm seeing. Confront is a very strong word. What do you guys think? I mean, it's a strong word because potency is a strong thing, you know.
I think that this is linking with that timing. When is the timing to give the permission? Maybe there's also timing to confront, because if there's enough trust and safety around it, when the therapist or even and from my side, the coach confronts you, you role model something. It's rich in strokes. Like, I believe that you're able to withstand this amount of challenge. And also there's I suppose, depending on how the confrontation is framed, it can be appreciatively focused. So there's there's a faithfulness to how somebody is potentially going to respond to it.
Yeah. I think also to keep in mind that the confrontation here is not with the client, it's with the parent in the client. And that's then, to do that would mean you would need to be pretty potent to do that, and to do it in full awareness of the dangers of that. I see that Marika de Groot wants to come in. Shall I let her in? Yeah. It's a bit late, Marika, but it's okay. We're actually going to move. Let me stop sharing. Is she coming in?
Yeah. So we're on an hour.
Paler and paler. Why?
Good morning.
Hi, Marika.
Hello.
It's nice to see you.
Likewise. I'm really excited. Hi there. That is probably the most youngest TA person.
Student. Yep, absolutely. Marika, you are actually an hour late. You might have, our clock is different possibly or something, so you missed.
Checked and double checked.
I can't believe we've been going for an hour. But it doesn't matter. I'll quickly catch you up, and then we actually are about to move into something that we haven't started yet. So your timing is not too bad on that front.
I am terribly sorry.
And we'll see how it goes. Yeah.
I'm an airline pilot. I know how to deal with time differences. I'm not quite sure how I got this wrong. I'm so sorry.
Okay. Well, before we go on, yes, Andrew.
I was just gonna add some more reassurance. Every time that I feel like I've got my thumb on doing time zone changes, I don't know. There must be some little gremlin in that system that goes, "I'm gonna get you this time."
I don't know. It's something weird to tweak in our brains, yeah. But Marika, where are you? Can you give me a bit of I've never met you before, so perhaps we should do a quick little introduction just to settle you in.
A quick introduction. My name is Marika, and I love to how you pronounce it. You can also call me Mary if that's a little bit difficult. I'm from the Netherlands, and I'm doing my SATAA oral exam in 2 weeks.
Oh, exciting. How nice.
Yeah, I'm getting a little bit of stress at the moment. And the reason I wanted to join you is because I use the 3 Ps, or as Clark says, the 5 Ps really regularly. And I'd love to come to South Africa. And this is a dream.
Oh.
So that's where I am.
Okay, great. And Marika, what field are you in?
Educational.
Educational. Yeah. Okay. Oh, wow. That's interesting. Okay. Well, what we've done so far, Marika, is we've looked at the 3 Ps. I've presented some of the quotes and theory that has come out of from transactional analysts' writings in the past, from the classical approach and theory to adapted and changed for different fields and a newer way of thinking. So we have gone that far. What I was now going to do, and I hope this works with you being here, and I think it will. So let's see how it goes.
Yes.
Is to talk about the permission wheel and about using that in terms of the 3 Ps, particularly in terms of permissions. But what we have been talking about, Marika, a lot is that with permission and potency and protection, but permission, I think in particular, the work for the therapist is work in terms of you're dealing with the patient's parent ego state. So the injunctions, and it's about going against the injunctions and taking permission, giving permission, getting permission, whichever way you want to look at it, to override or go completely against a parental injunction. So that is what we've been focusing on. And I thought that this model of the permission wheel that was developed by Giza Zhaoui, and I found this in an article by Laurie Hawkes, who presents the permission wheel in her article and how she uses it, would be interesting for us just to get a feeling of what it is like when we talk about giving permission to someone. What if we spend some time feeling what it feels like, and to what level, to what extent can we ourselves allow ourselves permission in certain spheres of self, shall we put it? Now I really have to try and get you guys out of the way and these controls all out of the way. It's going to be a bit tricky, but I'll move you around as we go. So I've got to say her name right. Giza Zhaoui. Okay, Zhaoui. Say again, Marika?
Zhaoui.
Zhaoui. Is that how it is? Okay, Zhaoui. Thank you. So what you can have any of you come across the permission wheel? Do you know it? Do you use it at all? Marika, you know it?
I know it, and I'm not using it this way. but maybe
Okay.
that's
All
also
right.
because of the
Yeah.
field. Yeah.
I know
Yes.
the
Okay.
Permission
So
Wheel
interesting.
by Evelyn Papal, but I haven't
Yeah.
seen this one.
Okay.
Although it's very similar.
Oh, that's interesting as well. Okay, well, let's have a look. So the idea of this is, and if you were to actually work with clients or a group or whatnot with this, I think it would be quite a nice one to use actually physically. So to draw this on a huge piece of paper, put it on the floor and allow the person to stand in the center.
Mm.
And the center there is seen as, this is where we have the least amount of permission. And as we step out, we give ourselves more and more permission. So this is like a bubble of what we feel is safety. It's kind of a safe bubble. It's where we have made our decisions not to allow ourselves to do things. It's where we obey our injunctions the most. Okay. So, and what she has done with this is put the me and myself permissions around this top left, me and others, bottom left, me and the world, bottom right, me and my feelings, top right. So if you were to take any one of them, and we won't go through all of them, but just do it for yourself for a moment. Choose one. Perhaps you're already aware of your strongest injunction, maybe. Perhaps you might discover others that you didn't realize were so strong, but step out as if you are stepping out ring by ring in giving yourself permission and observe within yourself what happens. And you can observe yourself physiologically, actually, and see what happens to heart rate, to tension in the body. What's going on as you step further and further out? And then I'd be interested to hear a bit from you as to what happens for you. Which ones were easy to just walk on out, and others were, well, okay, this is as far as I can go. And then what happens when you get to that stopping point? So I'll give you a few minutes to do that. In fact, I'm going to disappear even from you for a while, so you feel free to do this and not have me waiting for you. If I can, from here. Can at least mute. Oh, there it is. Stop my video. And mute. Okay, how are you guys doing? All done? Okay, that. All right, so I'd be interested to just hear some of your insights in that. Yeah. Anyone feel like sharing the experience?
I don't mind.
Andrew.
Marika, do you want to go?
Well, thank you. I love the way of you imagining it on being on the floor, because it's a kind of activity I would like to do as well. And I'm stepping out a little hesitant at the belong part and the trust part. Yeah.
Okay, Andrew, did you? Yeah, sorry, Marika, any more?
No.
Okay, Andrew.
Yeah, I suppose what struck me is that there was a few that were very easy to say, yes, I've had lots of permissions around, and a lot of them have to do with I think traditionally seen as positive things. So and I'll say that in contrast. So like obviously like joy as a feeling seen as positive, but anger is seen as like you're not allowed to be angry.
Yeah, okay.
So anything that's not a happy feeling is therefore must be bad. So when I went around the ring, around the different segments, the ones that were sort of like traditionally seen as like good or happy, I had lots of permissions, but then have struggled with the ones that may have had a bit more sort of like cultural weight put on them. But then interesting that there was also a couple where I felt like I had lots of permissions, but contextually. So in particular, trust, belonging, and being close. So like with close family, having lots of permission to be there, but maybe a bit more of a complex relationship with that of meeting new people.
Okay, yeah. All right. So context. So you've brought in the social aspect of it. That socially it's more okay. It's okay for us to express joy, but not anger, for instance. And then the contextual aspect of it as well. Did you come across any that psychologically you really got stuck with? Oh no. So for instance, as I did the wheel, I can go me in the world. For me, it's absolutely fine to think. I can walk right out there. And that definitely was, in fact, I was expected to think as a child. That was the injunction or the counter injunction, do think. So to know as well, to find and to discover and to know, to grow up, all of these were fine. But then I'll get to something like anger and I'll feel it. So if I really get into the feeling, if I step out and go, oh, it's okay to be angry, how angry am I allowed to get? There's a point at which I go, oh, no. Can't go that far. Or to succeed. How much am I allowed to succeed? How many rungs am I allowed to step out? I can succeed a bit. And what is the injunction about? For me, that would be don't surpass your elders. And I feel it. I feel it actually physically. The moment where I get to, okay, that's as much as you are allowed to succeed, Marguerite. And I actually feel like I can't take another step out, you know. Yeah. Andrew, you're nodding.
Yeah, I resonate with that. And like the anger one, is quite easy to tap into, like just not being allowed to be angry. And what can be quite funny and now, you know, post events is reflecting on how how bizarre being angry has been, because I just don't know how to do it. Or for a long time, I just didn't know how to do it. And so like I would still reckon that I've got plenty of space to work on around anger. And then interesting with succeed, I had lots of permission to succeed, but I do experience quite a robust invisible wall, and I'm so curious about what is that one about.
What's that about? Yeah. And Kirsty, I don't know if you'd be able to engage. I know you're having to do 2 jobs here at the same time.
Yeah, I was wearing 2 hats during that. And then that kind of got me thinking of how I feel like I approach permission from 2 sides. So the first is, giving myself those permissions, and then the other is, obviously Evie is right at the beginning of her script journey and thinking, well, how do I give her these permissions? And so there's a bit of a parallel process going on. I've noticed recently where in giving her permission to be angry or frustrated, giving myself the same permission, and demonstrating for her that actually it is okay to feel. It is okay to stop and think. It is okay to be a child. You know what I mean? Like all of those kinds of things. So I sometimes feel like in parenting her, I'm reparenting myself slightly.
Yourself.
And okay. And but anyway, during this in particular, I was looking at the health one, having just been sick. And just kind of recovering and noticing how whenever somebody said to me in the last couple of days, especially, how are you feeling, being almost hesitant to say I'm feeling better, like I was getting something out of not being well, and giving myself, like having to literally note, and I noticed that the last couple of days, and giving myself permission to say, no, I am actually feeling a lot better. And thinking, well, what's that about? What injunction is there around being healthy and not being healthy?
Sure.
And what is that?
Interesting. So the reason I thought this was useful in this discussion is that if we were to work with somebody and be wanting to give permission for them to disobey an injunction, it's useful for us to know how that might feel. Because it's very different to sit on the outside of somebody and say to them, you can do this. So if we experience the extent to which disobeying our own injunctions affects us mentally and physically, then it can give us some idea of how we have to tread with another person in terms of the idea of giving permission, so sort of easily, Are there any other thoughts or comments before I move on to show you a piece of organizational work in the 3 Ps where it comes to mind? Any other comments?
Marguerite, the thing that came to mind now of what you were saying at the end of being able to be aware of how to tread, it's something that I've appreciated being told or supported to understand, and then I occasionally am able to do this with my clients, is say that it's okay to be appreciative of your injunction. I don't use this language, but in theoretical terms, it's okay to be appreciative of your injunctions because they got you this far in life, and now you're reaching a point where they're no longer serving you. So and I think that in my experience is that kind of helps give some strokes to the adult here and now person to be, again, to use these terms, creative, resourceful, and whole, and maybe even potent now to move forward.
It's that, to me, is a potent message to the parent in the person that says, you're okay, you have done a good job of protecting up to now.
Nice.
I think that's pretty potent. and this person can change. So
yeah.
yeah,
That links back to that
lovely.
individuation that you highlighted earlier.
Yeah. Say more.
I was trying
Yeah,
to
the
find
difference.
the phrase.
Yeah, sure. It could be anywhere.
So my very simple understanding of individuation is it's that healthy process of stepping out of the healthy symbiosis and figuring out your own okayness to be
for yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, so that individuation process can happen at any point.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I like really
maybe
what
re-happen.
I really like what you're saying, Andrew, because it for me it's about resilience instead of going back to a trauma piece or bad feeling or a situation, and it goes to resilience, and that we all have that kind of vices in us.
Yeah.
And also something around radical acceptance of your script and your injunctions and everything, and like rather than going like, oh, here's this injunction coming up again, I better give myself some permission. Do you know what I mean? But just like going, well, this is part of my story, and I know how to respond differently to it now that I'm better equipped, and I can give myself permission to do that. But the fact that it's there, I'm not gonna resist.
Yeah.
It is what it is. And that can like help the process as well.
Yeah. That just somehow gave me a picture, Kirsty, of decontaminating the adult. I mean, when you decontaminate the adult, you don't eliminate the parent. You just push it out of the way of the adult. So in Andrew, what you were saying, and that message being to the parent within, I get that you've served a great purpose for me. Well done. You've been there. You've protected me. And now I'm okay. And I can take it from here, would be a kind of decontaminating the adult, not eliminating the parent, which would then help to prevent the parent from causing a massive backlash, a script backlash, because the parent still is allowed to exist and is still okay. It's lovely, lovely way of doing it. All right, so I thought we wouldn't take the 2 hours. Funny. Sometimes when the group is smaller, we do more, you know. So let's have a look at the organizational work and what my thoughts on this. Okay. So there are times when I'm asked to go and work with a group in an organization. And there are a few things about that. One thing, first of all, is that when we enter an organizational space, we're working in a corporate environment, say. What we do is adapt to form attachments in the workplace. So there is that authenticity versus attachment thing going on, even though we are now, you know, in a very grown-up space, so to speak. And I see that a lot, that we look to the leader, they look to the leader, they're looking at who's okay and who's not okay around here. Which camp do I need to be in to be safe around here? What do I have to restrict and constrain about myself in order to get along in the workplace? So there's quite a strong adaptation that goes on for the individual at that level. What happens with that is I see that we talk a lot in organizations about silo mentality, and it's always so intriguing for me how the moment we are put in a group, we start to see ourselves as okay and anyone outside of the group is not okay. And whenever I'm doing work, I will point out to the group who is complaining about them that if I had them here, they would be saying the exact same things. How is it possible? You know, and it's the silo mentality. We're okay. It's them who's not okay. So that is something that I'm often presented with in the work that I'm doing. And then I'm also looking at what goes on in terms of the strokes that people are getting and giving in the workplace. That if we engage in games and trench talk, so if we don't solve our problems, And if we sit in our particular division, department, or team in our little silo and we complain about them, we don't have to change anything. And we can get a lot of strokes for that. So there's the canteen or the cooler, the water cooler talk that is filled with strokes for being negative, for feeling like it's us against the world. So there's a lot often of that I can see that helps prop up the silo mentality, the we're okay, they're not okay life position that may be taking place. And in that then is discounting. So I'm listening for discounts, I'm watching for passive behaviors, and where does the symbiosis lie? And they're often groups because they are with me now in this room, in a silo, and they speak very openly, and they allow the discounts to just fly about the room, which is also an interesting thing. So they will state certain things as if they are facts. So they will say things like, that's just the way you have to do things around here. When I ask them, why that's just how it is. Welcome to this company. And those kinds of discounts are just thrown about as if that's a fact, which is really interesting. But it gives me lots of information as to where to go and what to do with this and how to do it. And then so what I did here was, this was an earlier slide, and I thought, okay, so what about me in organizational work with the 3 Ps? If I look at what we have looked at before in the early writings on the 3 Ps, I need to hook. Now, it wouldn't be the patient. For me, it's the organization, for the team and the individuals in the team, their young professor, by supplying more data. I must be stronger than the group's original internalized parent. And I'm giving permission to the group's child to disobey the instructions of the parent. So this is really interesting in organizational arena, because if I just walked in and did all of this stuff, I would cause a lot of havoc. But what I wanted to show here to represent this, I think, is so I'm dealing with the parent. I'm dealing with the parent, each individual's parent ego state, and then the parent ego state of now the group that has been formed. And looking at what is the makeup of that. But if you think about how this is the structure of the parent ego state is, we have here all the parent, adult, and child ego states of all of our caregivers, of the people that influenced us in early life. So this first one might be, my mom, my dad, right? And this all forms my parent ego state. This next one may be Auntie Jean, and then there's Uncle John, and then there's Teacher Joe, and whatever. So those are all a part of me. But then for me also, there is an aspect that I've now taken in as well, and that is the parent ego state of the organization. And I take that, I interject that these are the rules, this is how we behave, this is how you get along here, this is whose side you need to be on. All of that stuff I take in, and that then also becomes a part of my parent ego state when I'm in the workplace. So when I'm working with all of that, not just one piece. If I was to just work with the parent ego state organizationally, I can propose, why don't you change this? Change the policy, do this, do that. And then wonder why it doesn't happen or why it fails. And I think for me, it's important to recognize, because I'm dealing with a lot more than just the organizational parent. I'm dealing with all the parents in all the people who have an impact on what is going on there. So for me, did someone say something? No? Okay. For me, in terms of breaking this down into, again, the permissions, the potency and protection, what I'm looking for and what I'm asked to come and do is, in terms of permission, give permission to change, and that the person needs to take permission to change organizationally, but also to disobey their own parent programming in their own heads. And that's what I'm saying here. The potency is to override their programming organizationally and in their own heads. So to be stronger and more convincing than the parent programming. And the protection, again, organizationally, but also from the ramifications in their own heads, that it's both will be going on for me at the same time and need to be kept top of mind. So when I'm working with a group in an organization, I'm listening for individual injunctions, and then how does that add to the story of the group? So there's that aspect, as well as asking about looking at the organization in terms of its culture and in terms of its policy and in terms of its procedures and what terms of what we can and can't do here as an organization. Does that all make sense? Yeah. So with that, then, in terms of working with just the permissions, I would work with brainstorming and lots of child interactions around what if. And this is also just playing and letting them dream and imagine. Why not? You say you can't do that. Why not? How about this? What if you tried that? What would happen if? But definitely in a child-to-child transaction. That is where this work would take place. It's not and shouldn't be an adult type of suggestion or a parental type of instruction at all. It is just getting people to dream and imagine, what could you do if you could do anything? And while they are playing, then I can listen for the discounts. I can listen for where the adult is contaminated by child fears, parent beliefs, rules, regulations. And then possibly add that in the mix with recognizing that and questioning it, but a lot in a playful kind of way. So for me, the permission area starts in the play, just to allow people to put up whatever, and then also to allow them to let their fears and their rules and whatever be said as well, so that we can hear that and recognize the sticking points. The potency for me is for me to be able to supply more data. And where that is that I give them information possibly on policy, procedure, even legal stuff. Because when you're playing, when the child is playing here, they will come up with things that they want to do that maybe they need to know more about before they rush out and do them. So there is supplying adult information. Confronting the discounts is what I'm there to do. And the way that I do it needs to be strong enough to be heard. What I do is use steps to success for this process, because I think Julie Hay's steps to success, it actually takes away from me having to be potent. Use the model, and the potency is through the model and then into the group and their process. So I actually, I have the steps to success if you want to look at it in more depth in a moment. But the third P, the protection, would be where once we have done the child create dream, what do you want to do if you could do anything? We start to then bring in the, okay, keeping in mind company policy, company procedure, law, what can change, what can't change, the systemic aspects of this, who will be affected when we change one thing, what will happen down the line. And this then all comes into strategizing. And that is where protection comes up with, and if you do this change, what will happen? What will you do if it goes wrong, for instance? What help do you need? What will this mean for you as individuals? So that goes back again to protection for the individuals in this group who may be very scared. What sometimes happens is that the group gets very excited. Yeah, we can do all of this, but you have somebody who's got very strong injunctions that are going, not a chance. But they will pretend, because the group is pulling this process, so they will pretend and go with the group. So there's a moment for me of saying, okay, everybody just sit down for a little while and think as an individual, what is happening for you in your mind around this wonderful change idea that you have come up with? How safe do you feel as an individual in being involved in the process? And then as a group, How safe as a group are you? And the question then, Andrew, you talked about strokes earlier. What strokes will you get or give yourselves to replace the ones that you are getting now? So if we are up to now, have been getting all our strokes for trench talk and water cooler talk and playing games like, look what they're doing to us now. What's going to happen when we fix all that? It's going to get quite boring around here. So what can we replace that with? Is there a strategy for replacing those very potent strokes with something else? I then also sometimes offer to use the protection wheel in order to change in the organization. How safe is it to, and then do this exercise to again still be working in this internal process of the protection that I need in order to change my own permissions, my own potency in doing this, and for them to get to feel now, if we do this, what does it mean for your injunctions? I wouldn't use that word or that language, but that's what we're looking at. But also give them an opportunity to change the words to things that may be in terms of the change that they are considering. I was thinking here, for example, of an organization that is very constrained by very old policies and procedures. It is a government institution. So then it goes beyond its politics, its legalities. There's a lot that holds people back from changing something. And where I do the work there is with interns. So there are master's graduates come out of university, go into an internship in this organization, and they come with bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, lots of ideas, lots of change that they want to implement. And I've seen how they come very quickly up against the actual injunctions of the organization, some of which are quite unreasonable, but they have been passed on from leader to leader, from team to team. So for me, it's to change some of the words here and say, how safe is it for you, and would it be for you to argue your case, to confront management, to put in a proposal of a bright and bushy idea that you've come up with, to oppose what you see is wrong, to step up, to be seen, and even to cooperate sometimes, because for some of them, that's where their sticking point is. So we put these on the wheel and let them walk and say, oh, that's completely safe, but this, no, not in this organization, no ways. And on top of it, I wasn't allowed to confront when I was a child. Are you kidding me? So this also helps in the organization to really sense and feel this in their guts. Where is this? When I start to say, no, I can't go any further with this one, or when I stop right in the middle and go, never confront management. No way. What does that mean now? We've got a beautiful proposal. We've got a beautiful idea. We've come up with this whole thing. You've dreamt about it. You're going to change this and that, and then we do this wheel. Mm-hmm. And then we can unpack that more. And as a group, they can massage this. They can offer each other support. They can be potent for each other. If we do this, what will happen? Is it okay? Can we give ourselves more permission to stretch than we thought? So this, that is what I would then bring into the process. This is the steps to success, right? So as I said, I would use that. So the permission wheel with the organizational words, possibly replacing some of, not necessarily all of, but some of the words on the wheel. And this being a way for us to really look at the change by identifying where do we get stuck. And where do we need permission? And from whom do we need potency, power protection? So I use this to look at where will we get stuck and what do we need in order to unstick. Do you guys know it? Shall I go through it? Are you all, you're good with it? Yeah?
Very familiar.
Yeah. I had quite a lovely one not so long ago. It was actually on a TA 101 where one of the guys used this and said, okay, I've been wanting to start my own business in coaching for a long time, and I've done everything that there's to do, and yet I'm not getting there. I'm just not doing it. I don't know what's stopping me. So the issue was starting his own business. We went up each step, and he was, yes, it's significant. I want to start this business, and I have the solutions, and I have gone out there, and I've got all the skills, and I've got my strategy. I've got the business plan is all there. And then when he got here, he went, oh, but that's the problem we've been working on is the wrong problem. His problem is not being able to start the business. His problem is fear of success. So what we did was we went back to step one, and he went, well, it's the first time I've ever acknowledged that I have a fear of success. I didn't really realize that it was there. Now I do. Yes, heaven's sake. He got very excited. It is more than significant. It's wonderful. And then this step, the solutions, was where we didn't continue in the 101, but for him, where he needed to go, okay, I've got to go out there and believe that my fear of success is a problem that can be solved. And what are my solutions? And from there, he could take it further on up. So I thought that was just a wonderful use of this tool to even help us identify that we're analyzing the wrong problem.
That's also a success.
You say some more, Marika? Yeah?
That's also a success.
I'm not sure if I understand what you mean.
Well, if you're going to the steps and you conclude that we're looking at the wrong problem, that's also a little bit of a
That
success.
is a success.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yes, I get what you mean. Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay, so are there any thoughts or questions around what I've presented from that organizational point of view? I don't know if you want me to go back. I went through all of it without stopping for discussion, but that is really the end of what I wanted to present today. So yeah, any questions, thoughts? I imagine, Marika, that educationally, well, where do you work? When you say in education, are you a teacher? Do you work in that kind of environment?
Yes, I'm a trainer of pilots, and
okay. Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
and we have the of course, flying an airplane is a skill thing, but there's also the non-technical, and that's the human part, and that's where I come in. Yeah, because of the well, there are a lot of incidents and accidents that are still contributing to human factors. So
yes.
So that's what I do. Yeah, and in the educational part, I recently I'm training instructors at the moment in a learning environment, and I'm giving the 3 Ps as a sort of donkey bridges to them to start interacting with their students in a way that they don't see the faults, but also the qualities, and how does it come that kind of way. Yeah,
that's interesting. I actually did my case study on doing what you're doing. I was using TA in the South African Air Force flying school. So with the instructors.
Lovely.
And I was given all instructors and all the students, so we could and then bring them together in the process. It was just such a fascinating, and I wrote my case study on that.
It's a fascinating business. It's a fascinating.
And Andrew used to be an Air Force pilot.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
No, not me.
Okay. Didn't you?
My husband.
Oh, that's right. It's not you. Oh, who I haven't seen for ages.
Yeah.
I just remembered. Yeah.
Maybe thinking of Alex as well.
And Alex.
Yes, Alex used to be, but Guy is your husband.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I met him then at the Air Force when I did the work. Yeah. Okay, guys, are there any? Yes, Marika.
It's a lovely way of looking at it. It's it has, of course, the same basis, but yeah, it's such a powerful instrument, a powerful things of the way of looking at it. Yeah, I love the subject. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Marika. Me too.
Yeah.
Okay, guys.
About the protection aspect and how in an organization it must be quite tricky if the company culture does not really support the change.
Yeah.
How to kind of get buy-in at multiple levels so that they're not just top down.
So my experience is it's so interesting because often where they ask me to come into the organization is because these people won't change and we need a change process. So management wants the change and feel that they won't change. But so many times when I'm then doing the work, in fact, this happened yesterday with a client where the team was describing all of what management has asked me to come in to do with them and saying management won't let them. Isn't that interesting? Talk about silos. It's kind of like, well, I don't have a job here because that's what management wants and that's what you want. Why don't you talk to each other? But they really were that divided that they thought each other didn't want, and they wanted the same thing. So that in that instance, it was really then a matter of what on earth is going on here that you could both be so not on the same page. What's getting in the way there, and to look at that. And then, there are other times when a group wants to change something and feels that management won't allow it. And that is the harder piece of work, because it's not for me to go to management to help them to get what they need in order to change. It's for me to empower that group to do that for themselves. And that is then where those injunctions and the potency of the permissions comes in, that they can override their own very firm beliefs that we can't. And that's why the steps to success, the issue of the skills. If you can't, what do you need? What are the solutions and what is the strategy? Where do you get stuck? Why do you get to this conclusion of we can't? To the point where they are able and willing to then go and take on management. And then what if they reject it anyway? How will you be then? So the 3 Ps to me are really important in all of that, because there is a good chance that after doing all of this with me, they still get rejected. So then what's going to happen for them? Yeah. And then there's also the individual aspect, because I'm also thinking of how I had one client where it was a small financial business and they had been sold and this was like a family thing. These people had been in this tiny little business forever and they saw each other as family, and that the owner was the dad, the father of this business, and he sold it to Old Mutual, this huge conglomerate organization. And they were grieving big time. I was asked to come in and do work on getting them to understand the changes that are going to come in. And then I was lucky enough, because I had Old Mutual people who were going to be taking over this team, and I had the old patriarch, the CEO of this, who had sold it, and the team. And I was able to say to them, can we change what I've come here for, what the mandate is, and can we let these people grieve?
Yeah.
And it became a grief process instead of this is how we're going to change this, and what do you think, or how are you going to fit in process. So it is also about recognizing psychologically what's going on here and what do they need, and sometimes to say, what you've asked me to give is not what I want to give, I was sometimes they're going, no, nonsense, come on, that's nonsense. We've got to do the strategy and move on. Truth is, I've never had that. I've always been able to say, can we change the trajectory of this? This is why, and this is what I'd like to do. And they've said yes.
Really demonstrates your potency.
That's a good one.
Thank you for that, Kirsty. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, guys, I am finished with my presentation and discussion. Is there anything left before we sign out?
Nothing from my side. Just a thanks for all of your sharing and insight and listening to our inputs as well. It's been wonderful to get to the benefit from your experience.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks. It's been lovely
to
hear yours
Kirsty.
as well. Yeah, Kirsty.
Yeah, no, I've enjoyed it personally. Yeah, as I said in the beginning when I checked in, it's really made me think about all different ways that the 3 Ps come in. So organization is interesting. I'm also doing more and more organizational work, I find these days. So finding that quite interesting. And then also just going back to the classical theory, which was, applied to a therapeutic relationship.
Yeah.
And I'm usually going through my own therapy process, looking at it and thinking, how is the, like looking at my therapist and thinking, well, how has she demonstrated this? And giving that to me.
Dear.
Getting a performance evaluation. She's doing well.
Yeah. Good.
But then also, just thinking developmentally how to use it and bring it in. Translate into my, so it's actually really, really interesting.
Nice.
And then, and then obviously on behalf of us, the South African TA Association, thank you so much for holding the space and sharing it. And I hope that anyone watching the recording will get in touch if they want to share anything or ask anything.
Be nice.
Yeah, and Marika, thank you for joining us for the last hour. I'm sorry you missed the first
Marika.
I'm so sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love
and you can at least watch the recording.
Oh, that would be awesome. Yeah. And I'd love the way that we're globally on this together.
Isn't it?
It's
really lovely.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is. We're going through some difficult times as a human global thing, and then it's well, where are the 3 Ps at the moment when we need them? Yeah.
Well, sure. There's a discussion, Marika, at the global level. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think I'm really hopeful that we can come out. Well, not better. That would be a judgment call, but we can grow. I still believe in also the vices of us.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Great.
So, thank you for having me for the last hour.
And all the very best for your exam.
Thank you.
What date is it on?
It's the 1st and the 2nd of December in Milan.
Is it in Milan? So it's in person? It's not.
Yes, it's live.
Not online.
No, it's not online. Yeah.
Nice. I just want to say to you, my CT exam, it is the best experience of your life. If I had known how joyful and how well held it would have been, I wouldn't have been so nervous. So our usual expectation of an exam and a board exam, really, it's a beautifully well held process. So I mean it when I say enjoy it, really enjoy it.
I'm looking forward to it, and I will. I will.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lovely.
Thank you. Yeah.
Good. Okay, guys. Lovely to spend time with you. Take care.